Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off so that we can give our speaker the maximum amount of time possible here. I'm Bianca Frogner. I'm a professor at University of Washington in Seattle. I direct the Center for Health Workforce Studies, but I'm also a member of the Award Network's leadership team and the webinar committee chair. Before I turn it over to our host and speaker for today, I'm just first want to say thank you to everyone who's joining. This is being recorded, and as always, you can find our webinars posted online for later listening. We will be hearing from Dr. Henry Xu from University of Toronto today, who will be speaking about the Buddhist contribution to dementia care. I think this will be a really interesting conversation. We always want to hear from you about ideas of speakers that you want to hear from, or topics that you want to hear about. And there's a QR code there at the bottom that you can scan, and you'll be directed to our webinar page where there should be a link to a survey where you can provide that information. That's also where you can find our recorded webinars from the past, as well as see what's coming up. Now, we are in the process of updating our webinars for the future, and I do want to note that there is no July webinar. It's the week of July 4th, so we're going to give everyone that month off. But please come back for August, and we will be having a conversation with various researchers and community members from the VA about how to develop career opportunities for certified nursing assistants, CNAs, and in VA nursing homes. We'll get that up online soon so that you can register, but you can also find, hopefully you're on our mailing list where you can get the announcements and click there to sign up. And soon you will be getting a newsletter from the Award Network with all the latest and greatest of what's been happening in the network. So I will leave announcements for that newsletter coming up. As always, I want to thank our wonderful webinar committee members who are instrumental in coordinating all these wonderful speakers. Jin Jun will be our MC for today. I also want to thank our leadership team for the Award Network, led by Joanne Spetz, who is the PI of the grant that funds this work. And the funding for this work comes from the National Institute on Aging, and this is our disclosure statement for that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jin to go ahead and introduce our speaker. Thank you, Jin.
Sure. Thank you, Bianca. Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Henry Xu from Canada, Toronto, Canada. So I'm going to give a brief introduction. He is a Shi Wu Day professor in Chinese Buddhist studies at Emmanuel College, University of Toronto. His scholarship focuses on Mahayana Buddhism, particularly in the I always butcher these words, although I know it's Maya, Maka, and Yogacara traditions. I hope I didn't mess up too much. Dr. Xu also explores contemporary Buddhism movement and Buddhist chaplanism and the development of Buddhism in Canada. In recent years, he expanded his research to include the intersection of Buddhist contemplative care and dementia caregiving, which we will be talking more about today. He's delivered numerous lectures, participated in the discussion on integrating Buddhist teachings in dementia care practices. He was a featured speaker at the Religion, Spirituality, and Aging Interest Group meeting at GSA, and that's how I was able to connect with him. And at this meeting, he discussed the spiritual care in dementia and aging from the Buddhist perspective. His research also encompasses contemporary Buddhist movements, as I mentioned, and in addition to all these academic pursuits, he teaches courses such as Buddhist care, Buddhist ethics, and Buddhist meditative traditions at his institution. And he also coordinates the Applied Buddhist Studies Initiative, fostering connections in the local and international Buddhist community. So with that introduction, I turn it to you, Dr. Xu.
Thank you so much, Jin. Thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for those who are joining and those of you who are watching it asynchronously later. Thank you. I am happy to share some of my research on dementia care. And this research is both personally, it also it comes from my personal experience and also, something that is an ongoing academic endeavor that I've been working on for years. To begin with, let me share my screen here. Like to mention that my research received sorry, a grant from the TLKY, Tongning Huo Yun Canada Society, which is a Buddhist organization. And a related paper, as you can see on the right, that was published, I think last year, 2024, in the journal Religion. However, what I'm going to share with you today focuses on areas that are not covered in that publication. So, um, my interest in this work, let me begin, was born of two intersecting experiences. The first is personal, something that I shared with Bianca, Kat, and Jean before we started today. And that is over the course of 15 years, I cared for my mother at home as she lived through all the stages of Alzheimer's disease. That long journey was not only a profound emotional experience, but also a humbling education in the nature of suffering, patience, and love. Some of them, some of the stages were more challenging, as I shared with the team here. But I always learn a lot from those experiences, and I always regret that there are things that I wish I would have known better and earlier. And that was something that, motivates me in this research, so that I hope my experience can benefit other people. And also, the second one was more academic in origin. I was invited to participate in an interreligious dialogue on dementia care, joining Christian and Muslim colleagues to reflect on how our respective traditions might offer resources for this growing and urgent field of care. When I was asked to speak from the Buddhist perspective, I quickly realized that, surprisingly, there has not been a single dedicated publication on the Buddhist contribution to dementia care. So that moment also sparked the beginning of this research project. So the central question I've been exploring since is, what can Buddhism contribute to dementia care today? And perhaps how can Buddhism contribute to dementia care today? So I've been asking these questions because, after all, Buddhism is an ancient religion that arose in a very different time and place, more than 2,500 years ago in India. To make its insights meaningful in the context of dementia care in the 21st century North America, significant adaptation is required. But not only that, this work also calls for deep listening and learning from other traditions. Christian dementia care, for example, has already developed over several decades and offers rich insights into personhood, memory, and spiritual accompaniment. I'm sure many of you have heard other speakers in this series about Christian dementia care. And these are something that I believe Buddhist caregivers and scholars can learn from these experiences in generous and constructive ways. One noteworthy example is the work of Cicely Saunders, whose efforts to transform Christian caregiving traditions culminated in the foundational principles of contemplative care. So, I listed, some of the core principles here, and they include respecting patients' autonomy, recognizing the profound impact of compassionate presence and deep listening, considering the physical, social, psychological, and spiritual needs of the individual, fostering tranquility and self-awareness, and perpetuating contemplative learning within a cultural and communal context. So these concepts provide an inspiring launchpad for Buddhists to formulate their distinctive approach. And this is perhaps the entry point where we can meaningfully welcome the contribution of Buddhist teachings and practices. The values that we have just mentioned here by Cicely Saunders, tranquility, self-awareness, compassionate presence, and deep listening, they are not only universally appreciated in the field of dementia care, they are also deeply embedded within the Buddhist tradition. The key question then is not just whether these qualities are important. We would all agree that they are, but how we can embody them in our caregiving relationships. In Christian settings, such embodiment often takes form through prayer, scriptural reflection, and a lived faith in God's presence. Buddhism, too, has its own resources for cultivating these qualities, resources developed over centuries of spiritual training and ethical reflection. This is one of the first books published in the field of Buddhist contemplative care. And in this book, you can see that several key counseling techniques, such as empathetic witnessing of suffering, deep listening, and being fully present, and so on, are recognized as integral to Buddhist spiritual care. The primacy of active listening, embodied compassion, and present moment awareness are also recognized as the bedrock of Buddhist contemplative care. And these are not essentially different from the Christian approach. So we can see the similarities here. What may be unique to the Buddhist approach is its skillful means of cultivating these qualities. So these are not just concepts, but some kind of qualities that we have to exhibit, to share, to embody in order to fully engaging ourselves in our services for those living with dementia. At the heart of this approach is the path of practice within Buddhism known as the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is the kind of framework that I want to look at the Buddhist contribution to dementia care. So through this ancient path, how might we be able to adapt them, modernize them, and modify them so that they can be applied, they can be used towards the understanding of Buddhist dementia care. While mindfulness meditation has become widely known and practiced today, even in secular and clinical contexts, it is in fact just one part of this broader framework. So as you can see, number 7 here, there is right mindfulness, but it's only one part of this integrated framework known as the Noble Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path offers an integrated model of spiritual and ethical development, encompassing wisdom, moral discipline, and mental cultivation. It is this holistic framework that I believe can offer a distinctive and valuable contribution to dementia care. So in a remainder of this presentation, I'd like to explore with you how each aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path might support our shared commitment to compassionate dementia care. Let me now introduce the main organizing principle for this proposed Buddhist approach. This path as a means to end suffering offers an integrated philosophical spiritual guide. And I won't go through what you are reading here, as the definition of all these 8 paths of spiritual cultivation. And what you are seeing, what you are reading right now on this slide are more or less very traditional definition of these 8 paths. But let's begin with our understanding of the right view, which cause us to see reality as it is. Well, it sounds like very, very spiritual, very remote when we talk about the reality. But there is also the mundane reality, the conventional reality around us. So let's take a look at this. This is not about routinely or blindly following a list of do's and don'ts, what is right, what is wrong. It's not that. But it invites the practitioners to develop a worldview of how things in the mundane world unfold and are causally related to one another. Okay, so this is, coming from one of the scriptural quotes. What is right view? Right view, said the Buddha, is, sorry, I need to, it's twofold. There is the right view that is affected by taints, partaking of merit, ripening in the acquisitions. And there is right view that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path. So I'm not going to give you too much scriptural analysis throughout the rest of my presentation today. But essentially speaking, what it means is that there are 2 kinds of right view. One is more conventional, more worldly, speaking, or directed. And then there is the right view that is more supramundane, more ultimate, as a path of spiritual cultivation. So I think what we can focus on, especially for our interest today, is on the mundane, conventional kind of right view. And more precisely, mundane right view requires a clear-eyed awareness of worldly phenomena as they truly are, along with an appreciation of how actions and intentions condition consequences within what the Buddhists called the interdependent matrix of lived experience. So we'll come to this teaching of dependent origination very soon. Right view also includes the understanding of the conventional truth in the world, including factors that contribute to the Alzheimer's disease. Factors here, other than old age, that contribute to the risk of developing this Alzheimer's include hypertension, diabetes, obesity, alcoholism, smoking, depression, hearing impairments, physical inactivity, and social isolation. Okay? So I think you all know this. But whether we know it as an information in our brain, or something that we take it to our heart, so that it would have an impact on how we live our daily lives is another matter. So from what I can remember, my mother had hearing impairment, but she refused to wear the hearing aids for a number of reasons. She did not find that helping, she did not find it comfortable, and so on. And after all, that was around 20 years ago. Maybe the technology around hearing aids were not so good and comfortable. I don't know. But I did notice that, after she developed, the hearing issues, she began to exhibit some of the early signs of Alzheimer's disease. Whether those two are coincidental, I don't know. Both are related to old age, but it is known that hearing impairment which may lead to social isolation as well, can be a factor that leads to the Alzheimer's disease. So any of these factors can lead to the development of other medical conditions, such as high blood pressure, if you are uh, having, for example, alcoholism, kind of issues. And when all of these factors combined would become the very cause of the development of Alzheimer's. But this is not just the medically related conditions. Other risk factors also include the environment, the diet, the lifestyle of the person. So this is, where we can find the relevance of the Buddhist teaching of dependent origination, which is central to Buddhist thought. This teaching articulates how suffering, including aging, illness, and death, how suffering arises due to a complex web of causes and conditions. In addition, there's also the insight that we are not static entities, but rather fluid processes that together constitute what we conventionally refer to as a person. Buddhists do not believe in the existence of a core permanent self. Rather, the components of our empirical being arise and cease independent on causes and conditions, following the principle of dependent origination. So from Buddhist perspective, what we conventionally call a person is not fixed or unchanging entity, but a dynamic and interdependent process. When a loved one no longer has memories of the past, Buddhist teaching reminds us that memory is not the foundation of selfhood. There is no static self to be lost, only processes in flux. And this view may liberate us from a fixation on what has been lost and attune us to what remains. Buddhist scholar Peter Hershock summarizes the teaching as follows, quote, "In combination, ignorance and habitual karmic dispositions render us deeply susceptible to compromised and eroded capacities for health and healing. Such dispositions blind us to everything except what we take to be good and relevant, what we want and intend, the meanings we attribute to our situation. This is to be blind to all but a very limited range of our practically infinite resources, always and everywhere present for revisiting the meaning of our situation." I find that inspiring, even though you might find some of the terms here are deeply religious, such as karmic dispositions. But what it essentially says um, is that it has profound implications for dementia care. One of the most common and painful challenges faced by caregivers, especially family members providing care at home, is the deep suffering that arises when the person they once knew no longer behaves, remembers, or relates in familiar ways. The mind becomes fixated on who the person used to be. And when that image no longer matches present day reality, distress, grief, and even resentment can arise. This is entirely human and deeply understandable, but from a Buddhist standpoint, such suffering often stems from an unconscious attachment to the static sense of identity, both in ourselves and in the persons under our care. So the Buddhist view of dependent origination offers a compassionate and liberating reframing. it reminds us that personalities, memories, speech patterns, and relational habits are all conditioned phenomena. They shift and change according to biological, environmental, and religious, and maybe karmic influences. And importantly, this view need not be in conflict with other religious perspectives, such as the Christian belief in the enduring presence of the soul. In fact, it can serve as a complementary perspective. For those in the Christian tradition, these changing external attributes can be distinguished from the deeper spiritual reality of the soul, which is not defined by memory or cognition. So there is still a layer of the understanding that is not touched by the belief in the soul, but that our personalities, behaviors, and so on are dependently originated or dependently arisen, so that we can relate ourselves to those under our care in that specific way, understanding how they arrive at where they are and how we are where we are in our caring for these people. In this way, the Buddhist analysis of the self as contingent, composite, and impermanent can serve as a helpful starting point for thinking about dementia care. It encourages us to meet our loved ones as they are in each moment rather than clinging to how they once were. And it invites us to let go of fixed expectations so that we can accompany them with greater presence, gentleness, and inner freedom. It encourages us to abandon rigid assumptions about personhood and to perceive those living with dementia not as lost selves, but as beings in process, worthy of respect, love, and presence. And, we talked about the conventional right view, and then there is a more higher form of right view. I am not going to talk too much about that, but let me maybe briefly introduce the more supermundane dimension of right view here. In Zen Buddhism, for example, there's the attitude of openness cultivated as in Japanese, shoshin, or the beginner's mind. It is not merely an intellectual concept, but a spiritual posture developed through meditative discipline. Shoshin enables caregivers and practitioners and clinicians to meet each moment without prejudice and to see each individual as a fresh mystery, not as a diagnosis or as a role as a static entity. Indeed, qualities such as deep listening, total presence, loving kindness, things that we heard before, we mentioned before, may be understood as the fruits of the cultivation of this shoshin, beginner's mind. So in other words, deep listening is not just an idea that we try to incorporate in our caring for others. It can be developed and cultivated as something that radiates from within once we are able to embody and realize the so-called beginner's mind, which is a state of mind that is not affected by our preconceptions or prejudice, but it's always fresh and living in the present moment. So and therefore they arise not from professional training alone, but from a profound inner discipline that dismantles habitual judgments and opens space for genuine encounter. So we now turn to the second division or the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is right intention. And you are seeing another quote from the scripture. Right intention builds upon the foundation by cultivating thoughts of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. At first glance, the term renunciation may evoke images of ascetic withdrawal, monks retreating into the forest. Sorry, I was meant to include this picture here, but well, I cannot remove it now. But that kind of static, that kind of classic image of the forest monks with a wholesale abandonment of social and familial obligations, but this is a misconception. In the canonical texts, renunciation is less about rejecting the world, but more about freeing oneself from compulsive attachment to sense pleasures. And this is what the first quote here is about. I'm sorry that it's been blocked by the picture, but it is about rejecting our compulsive attachment to sense pleasures. Okay. So let me read that for you. How is it possible that one living in the midst of sensual pleasures, enjoying them being devoured by their thought, consumed by their fever, and bent on their pursuit, could know, see, or realize that which must be known through renunciation? That is impossible. So this critique is not anti-pleasure. It is anti-addiction. It targets the feverish pursuit of gratification that blinds us to the deeper causes of suffering and precludes spiritual clarity. So how might we apply this in the context of dementia care? Let me suggest that renunciation in this context can be understood as the intentional relinquishing of habits that may contribute to cognitive decline, especially those linked to dietary excess or bodily neglect. Foods, as we all know, high in sodium, refined sugar, unhealthy fats, or those that are highly processed, even though they are pleasurable, might over time corrode the delicate neurological and metabolic balance necessary for cognitive well-being. Choosing to forego such pleasures is a form of quote unquote renunciation, rooted not in aversion, but in careful discernment. The second component is non-ill will, often equated with another term, which is loving kindness. Some of you might have heard that term in Pali, which is metta, M-E-T-T-A, metta or loving kindness. In caregiving contexts, ill will may not always manifest as overt hostility. It may appear, however, in subtler forms, including resentment, frustration, emotional withdrawal. When one is tired, overwhelmed, or grieving, it is easy to fall into aversive patterns, especially when the person we care for becomes uncooperative or unrecognizable. So the cultivation of loving kindness begins with oneself. If we do not extend patience and understanding to our own suffering, we are unlikely to sustain it for others. Buddhist teachings remind us that loving kindness is not merely a sentiment. It is an active intention, an orientation of the heart that seeks the well-being of all, regardless of their behavior or capacity to reciprocate. In dementia care, it means remaining open-hearted when the other cannot respond appropriately, when gratitude is absent, when communication fails, when recognition fades. And finally, about right intention, there is the intention of harmlessness, often associated with compassion. So non-ill will is associated with loving kindness, and harmlessness is associated with compassion. Compassion in Buddhist thought is not pity, nor is it the frantic desire to fix suffering. Rather, it is the willingness to be with suffering, to witness, to accompany, to respond with tenderness, and to not turn away. In dementia care, this manifests in the ability to sit with disorientation, to hold a hand during confusion, and to remain calm during verbal outbursts. It is a form of moral endurance that does not resist the reality of decline, but embraces it without violence, either towards the other or towards oneself. And much of the frustration in caregiving arises from unmet expectations, the belief that the person should not, the person under the care should be more lucid, should communicate, should appreciate. But right intention invites us to relinquish these demands. In doing so, we create space for genuine presence. So again, the idea that we learn from Christian dementia care. So right intention, just like right view, is not simply a doctrinal point. It is a living practice. In the care of those who live with dementia, it becomes the compass of our moral and spiritual orientation. It teaches us uh, to relinquish the need for things to be otherwise. That is renunciation. To stay open-hearted, even in difficulty. That's the teaching in non-ill will, and to refrain from harm and embrace vulnerability. And that is the intention of harmlessness. It is a reminder that ultimately our intentions shape the world, or shape our world. And in a world where cognitive faculties may wane, the clarity and gentleness of our intentions may be the most powerful medicine we have to offer. We now turn to the third division of the Noble Eightfold Path, and that is right speech, a teaching of particular relevance within the context of dementia care. Right speech may be the most subtle and challenging. When a person repeats themselves, says something untrue, or becoming verbally aggressive, our instinct may be to correct or silence. But right speech invites us to ask, is that true? Is this kind? Is this necessary? Sometimes the most compassionate response is silence, an open, attentive presence that does not seek to fix or to correct, but to bear witness. Among the eight noble paths, right speech is often underestimated in its depth. And yet, in caregiving, where communication becomes strained or fragmented, it frequently becomes the very terrain upon which compassion is either realized or fortified. When someone asks the same question for the 10th time in a single afternoon, when they mistake you for someone else or speak in a loop of confusion, our first instinct may be to correct, to dismiss, or to retreat into silence. But the Buddhist path offers us another way. Right speech compels us to pause and ask, is what I'm about to say true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? These questions do not arise from sentimentality. They are grounded in an ethics of presence. In the later stages of dementia, where verbal memory and logical coherence decline, tone and presence matter more than factual precision. A gentle voice, an open facial expression, and a compassionate silence may speak volumes where logic and correction fail. In such moments, right speech is not about information, it is about communion. It is less an exchange of words than an offering of sanctuary. The Buddhist teachings also highlight the understanding that through the act of naming, we reify experience. We attach labels, all kinds of labels in our daily lives, husband, mother, patient, demented person, and all of these labels that we casually apply to the ones around us and begin to treat these labels as fixed identities. In doing so, we obscure the impermanence and fluidity that characterize all phenomena and all being. The Buddha repeatedly warned against this tendency. The act of naming, while functionally necessary, can harden into ontological kind of illusion. As we saw earlier in the slides, the five aggregates, the components of our empirical being, are not to be mistaken for a self. Yet, when we fixate on names, we implicitly reinforce the notion of a stable, unchanging identity. This person is mine, this person is who they were, this person is their diagnosis, and so on. This process leads not only to attachment and grief, but also to misconception and suffering. So how then do we respond when our loved ones no longer behaves according to the narrative we have attached to their names? When the person before us no longer reflects the image associated with father, mother, or friend? The implications of this insight are profound. When we shift from naming to presence, from linguistic kind of projection to relational attunement, we begin to see the person not as a static identity, but as a process. All things are marked by impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. Those are foundational Buddhist teachings known as the three marks of existence. Language, when unexamined, can conceal these three marks of existence. But when approached with mindfulness and compassion, it can become a tool for liberation. It brings us to the practical challenge that language is not only an individual expression, it is also a cultural system and one that can perpetuate stigma. So the dominant medical and cultural discourses often describe persons with dementia as having suffered a loss of self, a term that implicitly equates identity with memory, cognition, and verbal expression, as you can see on the slide here. And more alarmingly are those descriptions that are dehumanizing, such as vegetative, empty shells, or demented. And this exists not only in English, in other languages too. For example, I speak Chinese. I know that the term "qi dai," which connotes stoutness or idiocy, someone who has gone, crazy. That kind of description is often used to describe people with dementia. And, in Arabic too, they have their ways that are used conventionally as a way of description. But from a Buddhist standpoint, this kind of language is not just imprecise, it is unethical. It contributes to suffering by reinforcing dualistic categories of us and them. It divides us in that way. I'm the one who is not vegetative, and here is the one under our care who is demented. Us and them, whole and broken, present and absent. So there are all kinds of dualities that we can establish through this misuse of our language. And ultimately, it misrepresents the person's ontological status and distorts our capacity to respond with compassion. According to a 2017 Alzheimer's Awareness Survey, over half of Canadians where I live, over half of Canadians reported using stigmatizing language when discussing dementia, employing terms such as senile, crazy, or not all there to describe them. Such speech not only dehumanizes but also isolates those living with the condition, instilling shame, fear, and social withdrawal. The result is not only personal suffering, but also systematic neglect. Here, the Buddhist teaching on right speech, which offers both a critique and an alternative, can be defined by the following four principles: speaking what is true, speaking what is beneficial, speaking gently and pleasantly, and speaking at the right time. So it's a little different from one of the Ten Commandments about not lying. It's not just about lying or not, it is about speaking appropriately. Uh, in dementia care, this means not merely refraining from gossip, lying, or harsh speech, but choosing our words with full awareness of their impact. And sometimes the most truthful and beneficial response, once again, is silence. It's not just a neglecting kind of silence, but a silence with presence, with compassion, with uh, that kind of facial expressions that you are there for the person. Okay? And finally, this approach also calls us as caregivers to examine the ways in which our own identities are wrapped up in language. To speak rightly is not only to guard against harming others, it is to guard against reinforcing the illusions that trap us. Illusions about control, about permanence, and about the eternal self. So to speak rightly, then, is to listen deeply, to see clearly, and to name wisely. And perhaps the most compassionate thing we can say sometimes in the face of dementia's mystery is simply, I'm here. So the remaining five divisions of the Noble Eightfold Path, in the interest of our time, I'll go through them very quickly. The fourth one is right action. There is a very traditional way of understanding it in the Buddhist literature, but I think the way that we can accommodate it and modify it in the interest of dementia care is to see action as care, as moral practice. So right intention in dementia care means ethically grounding our conduct. It is not just about avoiding harm, it is about actively respecting the person's remaining capacities and humanity. Every action, including changing a diaper, helping someone eat, or redirecting them gently, can be done with reverence or with indifference. So it is our choice to, to act for these patients. Uh, Buddhist ethics reminds us that small actions reveal the state of our hearts. Even when someone cannot remember us, they can feel us. Right livelihood can be interpreted for our interests as ethics in institutions. For professional caregivers and institutions, right livelihood means aligning one's work with ethical and spiritual values. This includes advocating for systems that honor time, presence, and spiritual dignity, not just efficiency. It means resisting dehumanization even when the system rewards it. As Buddhist scholars and caregivers, we must ask, are we participating in care systems that serve life or merely manage decline? So that's right livelihood. Right effort, again, for our reinterpretation, can mean sustaining the caregivers. Right effort protects us from burnout. It is not about doing more. It is about cultivating what is wholesome and letting go of what is not. Caring for someone with dementia can be exhausting. Right effort invites us to return to practices that renew our joy: meditation, nature, chanting, community, and so on. Caregivers need care too. So uh, as I'm reminded of a Zen saying, draw water, chop wood with mindfulness and joy. So, we can also do the same for our care of those living with dementia with mindfulness and joy. So, right mindfulness is about meeting the moment. It is the heart of presence. When we are mindful, we are attuned not just to what is happening out there, but to what is arising within us, within our hearts. Mindfulness allows us to notice the tightening of our jaw, the urge to rush, the grief that comes with small changes, and so on. Uh, Sometimes we don't notice them. But right mindfulness teaches us to notice and to respond, not to react. When someone in late stage dementia, mindfulness means attending to subtle cues, body language, their tone, their eye movements. Those are something that we have to notice with mindfulness. It means being fully present to this moment, this breath, this shared silence at the time when they are no longer communicative. And lastly, right concentration is about sacred presence, uh, cultivating stillness and inner spaciousness. Caregiving is full of interruptions, but our inner life need not be fragmented. A calm mind can turn a chaotic moment into a moment of grace. Through meditation or simply deep breathing, we create a space, a sacred space within. We hold our ground, not as resistance, but as presence. In this stillness, something remarkable can happen. The person with dementia may smile, they may reach out, and so on. And we realize that we are not only giving care, we are also receiving it. In closing, the Eightfold Path offers a pathway through it. It invites us to be more present, more loving, more spacious in how we care. Let us care not with fear, but with wisdom. And dementia strips away memory, but it cannot strip away the potential for connection, for kindness, for spiritual presence. And in this way, dementia condition and the people living with dementia can become a spiritual teacher for all of us as well. So that's where I would like to end my presentation here. Um, uh, I had wanted to end it around 12:50, so I'm a bit over time, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. That was so enlightening. I took so many notes. We have about 4 minutes. I want to
Yeah, sorry
make
about that.
sure. Oh, it's okay. No, no, that was fantastic. I have so many notes and just wanted to see if anybody have any questions.
Maybe could I ask a question? I'll
Yes,
take
of course.
the chair's prerogative. Uh, Henry, that was so interesting, and I realized how much we use language that is really puts the person who's dealing with Alzheimer's in a place that kind of demeans them. And I realized a lot of this seems so critical for the training,
Mm,
in our caregivers. And
right.
I'm just wondering if you've thought a little bit about how we can best disseminate this work. I mean, part of it is you presenting like this so we can share it out, but have you thought about ways in which we can really get this out more to the community out there? Or what efforts have you done? I know you talked at the beginning about different, readings in this space, but I would love to
Mhm.
get your thoughts.
Well, I am working on a monograph on the Buddhist approach to dementia care. So that would be one of the ways. But I know that my influence is very limited, and only, it's a very niche area. So I won't expect that too many people may read the work. But I noticed that similar guidelines are available. If you Google up, something like I don't know how the keywords should be, but the use of language, and then maybe dementia care, Alzheimer's. You can find guidelines published in. I read one in Australia, and there was another one in UK. I'm not sure about North America, but they have a full list of comparisons about how this is the way that we normally would address the people or relate ourselves with them. And this is a more appropriate way to use our language. So there are guidelines out there. Yeah. So I noticed that in my presentation, I did use the word patience, patient once or twice. And this is not the way that we should, name or refer to those living with dementia. Yeah. So I should correct myself that way too.
Yeah.
Yes.
It takes some time to, yeah,
Yes.
get used to
Yes.
that language and the change in language, especially since it's so ubiquitous in terms of how we
Right.
talk about
So,
people in
and,
healthcare.
and I mean, from the medical perspective, if you are medical doctors, those are patient to you. But to those who are offering dementia care, these people are living with dementia. They are not patient. Yeah.
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 Jen,
Thank
I
you for
see
the
that we're
question.
probably at time.
Yeah.
We really appreciate, Jim, you bringing Henry to our
Thank you
community.
again.
And Henry, thank you so much for your presentation. I certainly know that, the idea of being present with the person that you're with and just recognizing that they are who they are at that moment and having some
Mhm.
grace for that, I think seems so critical. So well, I'll certainly reflect back on this conversation in my own paths as I look forward to the future of my own parents as they get older and how we treat them. So
Yeah.
thank you for your time
Thank you for
and
the
I appreciate
opportunity and
everyone
thank
being
you
here
for the
today.
invitation. Yeah. Thank you.
Have a
Thank you
wonderful,
so much. Have a
okay,
great
have a
day.
wonderful day. Bye.
Stay in touch. Yeah.